We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Wednesday. We're in that weird week between Christmas and New Year's. It's a weird week because not a lot of people are doing anything, not a lot of people are working. So, not a lot gets done in business, and not a lot happens in the news. You got members of Congress still on vacation until what, January 8th, I think. And then they got a week to figure out the budget and the spending bills in order to keep the country open. We'll see what they do there. I think what's going to happen is like what happened last time. Very last second of the last day, they'll come up with another continuing resolution, give themselves another couple of months, and then won't do anything until the last minute of the last day. That's just what they do. We've got the Republicans not really concerned about accomplishing anything. So, getting this budget thing fixed is unlikely. Now, that said, we'll probably get to the 15th and they will come up with an answer. But either way, they've been dicking around with this for a long time and haven't gotten anywhere. Hell, the Republicans haven't accomplished anything in the House of Representatives. So you have to really question if they're ever going to get this budget situation set up or not. I guess eventually they have to, or at least take it to 2024 and let the Democrats do it. They may have to do that too, but I think they'll probably get it figured out ahead of time. You know, it's funny. This week is always toughest to do podcasts because, as I say, there isn't a lot of new news out there. Everything's on hold while people are on vacation, Congress and such. But there is still some things we can talk about. And I wanted to make a prediction. I'm really not, as much as you think I make predictions, I really don't make predictions. I just take what I see and I suggest how I believe it's going to turn out. And it's not a guess, really. I'm just looking at the facts, and the facts tell me something, and I say that's what's going to happen. I don't even think it's a prediction because it doesn't come from somewhere paranormal or psychically. It's just common sense and logic trying to figure it out. It's something we call, and the Republicans don't know anything about, critical thinking. So, anyway, since everybody else is making predictions about 2024, I will do the same. First of all, I think 2024 will be a lot like 2023 in the sense there'll be a lot of chaos, a lot of stress, a lot of strain. It's going to be a lot of shit hanging over our heads. We not only have all the issues that we're dealing with, but now we're leading up to a presidential election, a pretty important one. And we still have people really concerned about how it's going to turn out. I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way at all. I'm not worried in the least. I mean, I don't even see how it's close, to be perfectly honest with you. But what I predict for 2024, we're going to have a lot of the same problems, but this is going to be different because 2024 will be the year of accountability. We'll start to see some of this accountability coming to pass. Donald Trump with his cases. We're going to see members of Congress being indicted and going on trial. Now, not all of these will end before the election. And as I've said, I don't think that really makes that much difference. It'd be nice to get one of Donald Trump's trials done before the election, just so we have a conviction. I don't think that makes any difference to the Trump-lefucks. He could be convicted and sitting in jail. They'll still vote for this motherfucker. But there'll be a lot of people in the middle that won't even consider it. And there'll be enough of those people where it won't even be close during the election in 2024. I think ultimately, after the 2024 election, we'll have a blue wave, and that will be the beginning of the demise of the Republican Party generally, MAGA particularly, and Donald Trump specifically. So we'll have this tough year, but the positive side of it is that we'll see some light at the end of the tunnel. We'll see some accountability. We'll see some things happening that are positive. So it won't feel quite as rough as what we had in 2023. And then in 2024, that's when things will have the opportunity to start to truly shift the right way, the legal way, the democratic way. The only thing I will tell you about that is even though we will reach that in 2024, it's going to take some time after the fact to get things straightened out. It's not going to happen by the snap of a finger. It's kind of like going back to the inauguration of Joe Biden. I think a lot of people believe that the moment Joe Biden would be inaugurated, Donald Trump would be cuffed and dragged off to jail. Clearly, that didn't happen. A lot of people said, well, if that doesn't happen, nothing's going to happen. And that's just a fucking childish attitude. Nothing, when it comes to the judicial system, happens that quickly. We have to go through this process. And those people that say nothing's happened to Donald Trump, you're not paying attention. This guy has 4 indictments, 91 felony charges against him, and he virtually has no way out. And we're now starting to see that Donald Trump is realizing this. And the reason I say that is because if you listen to or read the things that he wrote on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, he's starting to lose his shit. He's getting angry. He's ranting and raving about things that may or may not have anything to do with his situation. Donald Trump is going through some things, as he once said. And what he's going through is something completely foreign to him. All of his life, his bullying tactics, his strategies, his bullshit, his talking his way out of things has always worked. But now he's running into a situation where all those strategies do not work, and he's confused. He is delusional, so he thinks ultimately he'll get this figured out. I don't know that he understands he's truly cornered and there is no way out. But every day he's trying what he's always tried, and he gets laughed at or it doesn't work, and he's confused at this point. So he's going to continue to flail right now. But as it becomes more apparent to him, he's going to flail even more. It's going to be a little crazy for Donald Trump. I mean, you think now he's threatening people and trying to incite violence? It's going to get worse before it gets better. Up until the time Donald Trump is actually put in jail and shut up, things are going to be bad in terms of what we hear in the media. That's why I think it's important that we expedite some of this stuff and get it done. Because the best first step into improving this country is shutting Donald Trump up. Take his platform away from him. Take him out of the mix. When he's out of the mix, then we can start to try to recover and rebuild and reestablish what is real and truthful and democratic. So what I'm saying is between now and the election in 2024, it's not necessarily going to be an easy year, but it's going to be a more pleasant year because we are going to see some things happen. It's been 3 years since Joe Biden has been in office, and there are people still just upset that it's not happening fast enough. And that's fine if you want to feel that way. But if you want to whine and cry and pout and do all that stuff, it doesn't do any good. Things will go the way they're supposed to go. People like Jack Smith are far more knowledgeable of what's going on and what needs to be done. We should just trust those people to do the job. I've said before, and I've had people tell me, if you can teach yourself not to worry about things that you can't control, life gets easier. Like I've said, I've talked to people in comments and DMs, and they talk about how they're anxious and upset and scared and losing sleep. I get that. I get that. If you listen to the media and you believe everything you're told, it does sound dire. But once you realize the media isn't telling you the whole truth, they don't want to tell you the whole truth because they want you scared, then you can look at things a little more critically. Look at the facts. Anybody out there who thinks that Donald Trump is going to win the election, you're not paying attention. There is just no path for Donald Trump to win the presidency. He doesn't have the support. He doesn't have the time because he'll be in court most days between March and the election. And his mental and physical health just will not be good. Everything you could possibly think of is working against Donald Trump. There is absolutely nothing positive working for Donald Trump. He doesn't have more support. He won't have more votes. And remember, in 2020, he lost by 7 million votes and quite a bit in terms of the Electoral College. So if it can't get better from 2020, why are we worried about 2024? I think as long as Donald Trump is around, people will be afraid. And that's why I say the first and foremost thing is we've got to take him out of the equation, take his voice out of the narrative. And then this country can calm down. And hopefully, some of the Republicans will see their way to think more clearly, more American, more democratically. And once we get that, then we can start heading the right direction again. It's going to take a little time once we finally do that. It's not going to happen instantaneously. Don't expect it to happen that way because it won't. All right. I have one email. Comes from Max. He says, Mike, I'm writing to tell you how impressed I am with the opening to your podcast. It is perfect, and I think it will solve the t shirt dilemma that you discussed with Backdoor. Logic, common sense, compassion. Yeah, who knew? You don't need a logo, yet those who now know these words will know. I would definitely buy that t shirt, Max. Yeah, on one of the shows I was talking about, somebody suggesting that I have hats and t shirts and merch and stuff like that. And I've been reluctant to do it because then it gives the impression that I'm trying to, um, what am I trying to do? Trying to, grift an audience, pull an audience in, and then start selling them shit they don't need. Um, I've had people push me on it though. And I said when I did the podcast and I was talking about this, before I do anything like that, I have to get a real logo created, something simple, something classic. It doesn't have to be anything um, real impressive, but it just has to be something. I know people will say, well, what about that little cartoon in Rational Boomer? That's not really a logo. I mean, technically it is. I paid somebody on $5 or $50 to do it. And the same goes for the intro. I will agree with you. The intro, the guy that did the intro did a good job, and he was on Fiverr too. I paid him like $100, and he made the intro and the outro, and he made a few versions of it. But I liked it because it was kind of what I was looking for, something with a retro 70s feel, kind of the big, powerful voice, and kind of tongue in cheek. And he nailed it. And, I thought about that too. What would you put on a t shirt? Common sense, compassion, a logic, common sense, compassion. Yeah, who knew? Yeah, I mean, people would know what that is if they listen to the podcast. They get it shoved down their throat every day when they listen to the podcast. Max, I'm thinking about the T-shirt thing and the hat thing. I'm a big time procrastinator, and I'm not sure the value of doing it because I've often said to you, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just the only thing I ask from you is attention, and you're giving me that attention, and I appreciate that. Um, my problem is if I do a T-shirt and then I wear it, then I'm going to get shit from my family. So I don't know. I've got some friends kind of in the business, and I've talked to them before, and I haven't really followed up with it. I'll maybe do that and just see what the possibility is. I'm not looking to make more money off the podcast. Really, I'm not. I'd rather have way more listeners than any money out of it. But we'll see what happens. I'll give it some thought. Like I say, I am a procrastinator, so I don't know how quickly I would do it. But there's parts of me that think it might be kind of cool, especially if we could do something good with it. Like I said, you know, I don't even know the way you would do a t-shirt or a hat is through one of those online services that print on demand. Because I'm not going to print the shit. The friend of mine that I know knows how to do it. Too busy with bigger shit. I'd have to sell hundreds of these things, and I don't think there's a market for hundreds of them. So I'd have to do it on the demand thing, and when you do that, there's not a huge profit, but there's some profit. And so if I did that, maybe take that profit and put it someplace where it was good to somebody else. I don't know. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. If I can come up with an answer, I will. All right. First story we're talking about today, according to former FBI official Andrew McCabe, the decision by the Supreme Court to defer the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit on the issue of Donald Trump's presidential immunity claim might end the legal fracas at that level. As I've told you before, a lot of people are freaking out that the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to hear it early. We'll wait for the appellate court. And as I've said, that's not necessarily a bad thing. They're just trying to cover their asses. They're dealing with a former president, something they've never dealt with before. So it only adds a couple, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month. So it's really not that big a deal. People are getting too upset about that. Republicans are acting like they got a big win and they didn't. All we can do is wait. We know that, today is December 27th. There's 31 days. So we're looking at, what is it, the 9th they're going to get together and hear arguments. We're looking at less than 2 weeks before they hear arguments on this case. And then shortly after that, they should have some answer. They will not give Donald Trump immunity. They'll hand it off to the Supreme Court, and then they will have to address it. Honestly, as I said yesterday, I don't think that they are even going to hear it. There's too much could go wrong no matter what they do. Now, with the nation's highest court punting the filing by special counsel Jack Smith to speed up the process for determining whether the former president is in fact immune, McCabe stated an adverse ruling by the fully seated D.C. Circuit Court could get the Supreme Court off the hook. So what he's saying is, depending on what the Supreme Court, what they find and what their decision looks like, it may not give the Supreme Court a whole lot of choice to go against it. As Newsweek is reporting, McCabe made a recent appearance on the Jack, a special counsel podcast with Allison Gill, where he claimed it is possible the Supreme Court won't step in if the lower court shoots down Trump's legal team's arguments as expected. Now, according to McCabe, if the full appeals court agrees with Judge Tanya Chutkan, the former president is not protected by presidential immunity. That will give the Supreme Court a pretext to not intercede on Trump's inevitable appeal. Ironically, I think he goes through that step and then he gets an en banc hearing. I think that makes the likelihood of a Supreme Court issuing cert even lower, because then you would have had likely two very consistent, very sound opinions by the most respected circuit court in the country, he explained. He then added, and it may kind of lift the responsibility from the Supreme Court's shoulders to weigh in if they feel like it's been adequately covered. So in this situation, there is a lot of negativity that could come out with him or with the Supreme Court siding with Donald Trump. And I think there are people out there that really believe they will do that. I don't. There's just too much at stake for them to go along with Donald Trump. And the argument is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way to sell that. No way that Donald Trump's lawyers can successfully sell it to any court, let alone the Supreme Court. And there's no way the Supreme Court can sell it to the American public. And of course, they have lots of problems with the American public currently. So I don't know that they want to wade into any more problems. Now, the one thing I've said before is if they take away his claim of immunity, that not only affects the case in D.C., but other cases as well. And that is a big gamble for Donald Trump. I don't think he honestly believes he can win. I think he's just trying to delay it as long as he can. He's a procrastinator too, because the inevitable is the inevitable. But he will try to delay it as long as he can. People keep saying he's trying to delay it till after the 2024 election, so when he gets elected, he can cancel it out or shut it down or whatever. Maybe Donald Trump is so delusional that thinks he has a chance to win. Reminds me of the Dumb and Dumber, where Jim Carrey's talking to Lauren Holly, says, "What are the chances a guy like me would get together with a girl like you?" And she says, 1 in a million. And he says, of course, "So you're saying I have a chance?" Well, there's a 1 in a million chance that Donald Trump may be able to navigate his way through this thing, but literally no chance at all. So if Donald Trump's end game is to win the election and then pardon himself, that boy is in for some serious disappointment because it's not going to happen that way. I think he has to keep telling him something to himself that he's got a chance because he thinks in the back of his mind there's a way he can figure it out and get out of it. But he's kidding himself because he can't. He's caught, he's done, he's not going to get immunity, and he's not going to get elected. So everything he's hoping for is nothing more than a fucking pipe dream. Well, something interesting happened in the Republican Party. And this has got me thinking of a theory. I wouldn't go as far as a conspiracy theory, but I guess you could call it that. Vivek Ramaswamy's presidential campaign has stopped spending money on television ads and does not have any TV ad reservations booked, according to his campaign and data from an ad tracking firm. As recently as the first full week of December, the GOP Entrepreneurs Campaign spent more than $200,000 on TV ads. Last week, it spent just $6,000 on ads, all of it on TV, and this came from Ad Impact. Now, Ramaswamy's campaign says it's still spending money on ads, just not on TV. We're focusing on bringing out voters we've identified. Best way to reach them is using addressable advertising, mail, text, live calls, and doors to communicate with our voters on Vivek's vision for America, making the plan to caucus and turning them out. We've got the primaries coming up for Iowa and New Hampshire. If he's no longer doing advertising, that's really interesting because any legitimate candidate for the Republican nominee would be doing something. I mean, by not winning or not even showing up in the primaries in Iowa and New Hampshire, that's pretty much a death knell to any candidate. That's why it's going to pare things down very quickly. It'll be interesting to see how Donald Trump does in Iowa. It looks good for him now, but he's got some problems there. In New Hampshire, it looks like Nikki Haley is only about 4 percentage points behind him, which is the closest anybody's got anywhere to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump's in trouble. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy, here's my theory. And again, it's strictly a theory. I have no facts on this. I don't know this for sure. But again, I'm just taking a look at what I see and taking a logical look at it, maybe some critical thinking. And the interesting thing about Vivek Ramaswamy is he never really had a chance. Even though he's been on the debate stage for each of the debates, he's really not pulling the kind of interest or support that somebody like him would need to have any hopes or aspirations of becoming the Republican nominee. But the interesting thing about Vivek Ramaswamy is he's crazy enough that he's basically parroting Donald Trump's rhetoric. As crazy as it is, he's repeating that shit. Now, I have to wonder in the back of my mind, knowing Donald Trump and how he behaves, you have to wonder if, in fact, what's going on is Vivek was never really a legitimate candidate. Nobody thought he would get the support to even be in the running for the Republican nomination. We also know that Donald Trump has refused to go to the debates because mainly he's a pussy ass bitch. He's afraid. That's the only reason he wouldn't go. He's afraid. He's afraid of getting tore up, or he's afraid of being asked questions about some of his trials coming up. He's going to be hard pressed to be able to answer those things. But I have to wonder if Vivek was kind of an operative because he's young, because he doesn't really have a track record, because nobody thinks he's going to win. And all of a sudden he shows up and somehow, some way, excuse me, he's on the debate stage talking like Donald Trump. Donald Trump's big on getting his point across and his rhetoric. So, what if Donald Trump said, here's the deal. I want you to run for president. We'll help you out a little bit. I want you to go on stage, and this is what I want you to say. And in return, I will get you a job on my cabinet when I become president. Sounds crazy, but it's really not that crazy when you think of Donald Trump and you look at what Vivek Ramaswamy is doing. It seems likely. I mean, Donald Trump is desperate at this point. He'll do pretty much anything. So it isn't out of the realm of possibility that this is what he's doing. Now, whether or not he's doing it, does that make a difference? Not really. Is Vivek Ramaswamy going to drop out completely? I don't know. I mean, this takes money to do this shit to even be considered to be a legitimate contender for the nomination. But somebody's going to have to feed him that money. I'll guarantee you Vivek's not going to come out of his pocket. He's either going to get it donated to him or somebody under the table like one of Donald Trump's PACs. It'll be interesting to see if we find out down the road that Donald Trump's PAC had something to do with it. This isn't something we haven't seen before either. Republicans are known for doing bullshit like this. So we'll see. Vivek Ramaswamy is not doing any television advertising in Iowa and New Hampshire, even though we have primaries coming up. I think once those primaries are over, of course, he's not going to win either one. It's going to be interesting to see how things change if Donald Trump does not win. That may have some bearing on Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, Tricia McLaughlin is the campaign's press secretary. She said, as you know, this isn't what most campaigns look like. We have intentionally structured this way so that we have the ability to be nimble and hyper-targeted with our ad spending. Typical thing, somebody screws up or can't do something and they say, oh, we planned it this way. We just planned it this way. So yeah, we're good. The shift in strategy comes less than a month before the January 15th Iowa caucus, first contest of the GOP presidential nominating process, and the January 23rd New Hampshire primary. Now, in early November, Ramaswamy's campaign announced that it would plan to spend over $10 million on ads, broadcast, cable, radio, digital, and direct mail in Iowa and New Hampshire. Since that announcement, the campaign has spent $2.2 million on all of that stuff. They said they were going to do 10 million. They've only done 2.2 million, and now they're pulling away from it. This all sounds very weird, and there's got to be some strategy there. Maybe Ramaswamy has finally realized that he has no chance and that throwing good money after bad money makes no fucking sense. You have to believe that's what it may be. We'll probably never find out if he was a Donald Trump plant or not, but it's certainly not crazy to think about it when you're talking about Donald Trump. That's exactly the kind of thing he will do. Now, even when Ramaswamy leaves the PAC, he's got so little support, it's really not going to help anybody out that much. Maybe Nikki Haley, because she's gaining some ground. But I doubt Vivek Ramaswamy supporters are going to go with Nikki Haley. I don't know who they'd go with, but not Nikki Haley because those two hate each other. The other thing I want to talk about too is Nikki Haley. Everybody's worried about Nikki Haley. I've heard some people say, I don't want to vote for Biden. I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump, but I might vote for Nikki Haley. And if you have that in mind, especially if you're a Democrat, you're being gaslit. You're being hoodwinked. Nikki seems like your typical middle aged woman, and she's trying to come off as normal and natural as she possibly can. But what you need to know is she is a Trump humper. She was an ambassador for Donald Trump to the United Nations. She stood on a stage, and when was asked if Donald Trump is convicted of crime, would you still vote for him? She raised her hand. She's not normal. She's not good. Whatever she's trying to make you believe is not true. So don't come to me and say, well, Nikki doesn't look that bad. Yes, she does. There isn't one candidate in the Republican Party that you should be considering voting for. They're all bad. If you want to perpetuate this drive to fascism, well, then vote Republican. But if you have a half a brain and you want to save this country and make this country a better place for our kids and our grandkids, well, then don't vote for any fucking Republican, for God's sake. I tell you, man, some people's children. Anyway, we will take a quick break and we will be right back. You know what I like more than anything about the Republicans? They spend more time fighting amongst themselves. They're so divided that they don't have time to even consider the Democrats. And every time they divide themselves or cause problems for themselves, they make them that much weaker. That's what I'm saying with all the negative things working against them. And then you throw in the divisiveness within the party. There's just no chance the Republicans can really do much in the 2024 election. Now, Republicans are desperate to avoid nasty primaries next year, but the architect of Kevin McCarthy's ouster from the speakership has other plans. Here's the guy we love to hate, Representative Matt Gaetz. And Matt Gaetz is a confusing guy. We know he's a creep. We know he's potentially a trafficker, maybe a pedophile. He's a disgusting piece of shit. But he's the one guy that's always in there and um, fucking things up for the Republicans. So you got to appreciate that a little bit. Representative Matt Gaetz is continuing to buck party leadership, which has tried to coalesce early this cycle behind candidates in key races. Now, Gaetz has instead thrown his support to other congressional hopefuls in several of those races, and his megaphone has already helped upend one of them. So the Republicans have a plan. They have certain people they want in there, but Gaetz is stepping in and saying, no, what about this guy? You see what I mean? They're dividing this thing. They become weaker in the process and making it that much easier for Democrats to win these elections. Now, Gaetz is a prominent figure of the most conservative wing of the GOP. He endorsed J.R. Majewski, who lost his bid last year after a report he misrepresented his combat duty in the high stakes races for Ohio's 9th district seat. Now, Gaetz has also voiced support for former Nevada State Senator Elizabeth Hegeline, who's running to the right in Nevada's 3rd district, and for Darren Bailey, an unsuccessful 2022 Illinois gubernatorial candidate who's now challenging Republican Representative Mike Boston, or Mike Bost, in Illinois. And see, I love this because he's supporting people that have already lost once. So, yeah, bring those losers back. That's what we want to do. Put the Democrats up against people who are proven losers. The common theme among these candidates who have caught Gaetz's attention, they're all ultra conservatives who are running in primaries against candidates backed by McCarthy. Now, McCarthy threw his weight around in competitive races early in the 2024 cycle, including endorsing Representative Heidi Cassima in Nevada and former state rep Greg Rydell in Ohio, both of which are top targets for national Republicans. Now, McCarthy has also boosted Bost's election bid and spoken out against Bailey for challenging the incumbent. But why is endorsement by Kevin McCarthy a thing? As they said, he got kicked out. His own party doesn't like him. So why would Kevin McCarthy's endorsement of a Republican candidate hold any water? Doesn't make any sense. At least Gates is still in the House of Representatives. And, so, frankly, so is Kevin McCarthy right now, but we're hearing rumors that he may leave at some point soon. Although we did hear that it might be before Christmas, and we haven't seen that as yet. So we'll see how that progresses. Now, Gates rebuffed the suggestions that he's supporting candidates because they're running against Republicans who have McCarthy's backing. Oh, no, I'm not doing that. Matt Gates says he's old news. Mike Johnson's speaker now. Like, that's a whole lot better. Gates has long clashed with McCarthy, refusing to vote for him during the marathon speakership vote. In January, Gates then led the charge in ejecting McCarthy from his leadership post earlier this year, throwing the House into chaos for nearly a month and drawing the ire of fellow members of the party. It was a blow to establishment Republicans who were already grappling with their thin majority of the House. Now, with McCarthy retiring just months after being removed, Gates is going after some of his chosen candidates. Now, one of the things that cost the Republicans in 2022, one of the reasons why there wasn't a red wave like they planned for, is because of something that Mitch McConnell said. Candidate quality nearly cost Republicans the House majority in 2022. There was a lot of problem with candidate quality. People like Herschel Walker or Dr. Oz in the Senate. They've got some of the worst fucking candidates ever. So now Matt Gaetz wants to bring these people that have already lost once and give them another run. Yeah, you go ahead and do that. Just keep pounding your head against the fucking wall. Now, there are some far-right candidates losing key races in 2022, as we know. Majewski was one of those candidates plagued by ads from Democratic Rep. Marcy Kaptur hitting him as an extremist for being on the Capitol grounds on January 6, 2021. So this guy was at the insurrection, and that cost him the election last time around. So let's do it again. Let's give him another run. See, this is the thing about Republicans. They don't care about what works or what's true or what's effective. They just want to shove shit down our throats. You didn't vote for him the first time, but this is a good guy. We think you should vote for him now. And I don't think that's going to work. Why would they do that? Especially since all of what's going on with January 6th is going to culminate over the next 12 months. We're going to learn more about the things that happened on January 6, 2021, things we don't even know about. There may even be members of Congress that end up getting indictments. And then how does that affect somebody who was one of the insurrectionists on January 6th? All right. Now, according to MSNBC legal analyst Danny Cevallos, the unearthed recording of Donald Trump and the RNC chair, Ronna McDaniel, plotting with Michigan election officials to block the certification of the 2020 presidential election votes will likely be front and center when special counsel Jack Smith presents his case in Judge Tanya Chutkan's courtroom. So when they finally do go to court, that audio tape is going to be played in that trial, and it will have a significant effect. Because as damning as the audio recording with Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, this one's worse. This one shows these two clowns actually committing the crime. There's no way to divert, distract, or delay this. It is what it is, and it's an audio recording with Donald Trump's voice on it, Ronna McDaniel's voice on it, and it is what it is. The other thing you want to consider too is, and I've heard people ask about this, but we don't know for sure what's going to happen. As much as Jack Smith is going to use this evidence against Donald Trump in the federal case, it's conceivable that Michigan could set up their own indictments of Donald Trump and maybe Ronna McDaniel and some other people. I mean, Georgia did it. We're waiting for the Georgia case to happen. Michigan would have just as much position to do something like that too. So don't be surprised if Michigan comes out with some indictments for Donnie and his troop of dipshits. Now, after being prompt about the phone call by Morning Joe, fill-in host Jonathan Lemire Savalos began by noting that there was a lot of talk this last week about, well, could this expose him to liability in a Michigan court? And of course it could. He went on to say, well, maybe, but far more interesting to me is having defended federal criminal cases. I can tell you the federal court is not a fun place to be for a criminal defense attorney because the government is very good at what they do. If the government, I'm thinking they're looking at this Michigan evidence as what we call 404B, but all it is prior bad act evidence that sometimes under certain circumstances can come into the prosecution. He goes on to say, so if I'm Jack Smith, maybe you look at Michigan evidence or any evidence from any other state and bring that in as evidence in your DC court case and say, look, this is what he was doing elsewhere. This is not a mistake. This is his modus operandi. This all should come in, and it can be devastating evidence, he added. I can tell you personally that bad act evidence that somebody did something else bad somewhere else is devastating, and juries, they just eat that up. So once again, Donald Trump fucks up. He fucks up big, and this is going to be devastating for him in the federal case at the very least, and potentially in some state charges coming out of Michigan. We'll wait and see what happens with that. Now, here's a bit of interesting information that gives us some sense of what the people that Donald Trump or that follow Donald Trump and where their heads are at. A new pair of word cloud graphics from the Daily Mail reveal what voters are saying most about both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. And they reveal that voters most associate words like power, revenge, and dictatorship with Trump. Well, that can't be good. But the former president doesn't appear bothered by this. On the contrary, Trump posted the word cloud directly to his Truth Social platform on Tuesday. You see, Donald Trump at this point thinks this whole dictatorship is working in his favor. And it may be with a small percentage of Trump-lefucks, but for the vast majority of this country, they're no more excited about that than they are overturning Roe v. Wade. This guy just cannot understand how to run a race. He's done everything wrong. And this is why I constantly say, why are you telling me that you think he's going to win in November of 2024? He keeps fucking it up, and he's got another 11 months to make it even worse. And you know what? He will. He always does. Now, the post from the former president, who has already vowed that he would be a dictator on day one and has proposed a number of potentially authoritarian policies, like sending the military to the U.S. border, triggered alarm from some corners of the social media. Now, Trump just posted this word cloud of what voters think a second Trump turn would bring. Podcaster Brian Tyler Cohen, who's another good reporter, posted to social media. He's bragging about wanting dictatorship, revenge, corruption, and chaos. And you have to understand how Donald Trump thinks. He needs to be the smartest, the best looking, and the toughest. He thinks by acting tough, that's going to get him votes. And it will with some people, but most people are going to be fearful of this. And they're going to step away from Donald Trump. Wow, wrote Democratic youth activist Harry Sisson. He's on TikTok. Donald Trump just posted that this bragging about how voters think he wants revenge, to be a dictator, and more. He's bragging about wanting to be a dictator. Don't ignore this. Don't look away. Trump wants a dictatorship. He's bragging about it. This comes hot on the heels of Trump's Christmas Day tirade, of course, bidding special counsel Jack Smith and the thugs of the country to rot in hell. What a nice Christmas message, right? That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump cannot help but fuck himself up. He does it constantly, and he will never stop. He doesn't listen to advice or anything from anybody else. He just continues to open his fucking mouth and implicate himself in crimes or just embarrass the shit out of them. Talking about people who just spew shit out of their mouth and embarrass themselves, we got to talk about Kanye West. And Kanye West did something that was kind of surprising. Kanye West has talked some shit about Jewish folks and Israel and all that stuff, and he's got a lot of heat for that. Now it would appear as though he's getting tired of the heat. Kanye West returned to Instagram after a months long absence to issue an apology in Hebrew to the Jewish community after years of anti Semitic statements. Oh yeah, they'll accept that. Forgive and forget, right? I don't think so. He said, I sincerely apologize to the Jewish community for any unintended outburst caused by my words or action. Now, he's been open about struggles with mental health, and he's going to blame it on that. The fact of the matter is, he didn't make these side eye comments that you could take either way. He was pretty blatant about it. And to say, well, if you took this all wrong, I'm sorry. No, motherfucker, what you said was wrong, and you should apologize for your actions instead of apologizing for um, misdirecting people, that it's their fault. He goes on to say, it was not my intention to hurt or demean, and I deeply regret any pain I may have caused. Well, he did. You saw what he wrote. You heard what he said. He did and have intentions of hurting and demeaning. That's the essence of what he said. He says, I'm committed to starting with myself and learning from this experience to ensure greater sensitivity and understanding in the future. Your forgiveness is important to me, and I'm committed to make amends and promote unity. Yeah, all of a sudden you've got this epiphany, and now you want to be a good, decent human being. I think it's more likely that you're losing money and losing favor, and you're getting nervous. You have plenty of money. You can go to an island someplace and just live. But you also got the ego the size of fucking Donald Trump, and you don't like the fact that you said something stupid and now people are making you accountable for it. So you're going to come out with a bullshit fucking apology and expect people to buy that shit. I would be surprised if they do buy it. I don't buy it because you were pretty blunt about what you said. And there was no question what you meant or what you were feeling at that point. Now, West has for several years dabbled in anti Semitic tropes, which culminated in his suspension from Twitter for anti Semitic content posted after he declared, I like Hitler, in an interview with infamous conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. He was repeatedly suspended from Instagram for violating its policies and deactivated his account in April. The rapper is currently working on a new album. Oh, that explains that. He's got to sell records. So now he's got to play nice with the Jewish folks so they buy his fucking records. Good luck with that, Kanye. I don't think it's going to work. But he has a new album with Ty Dolla Sign, Vultures is what it's called. In a rant at a listening party for the album, West compared himself to both Jesus and Adolf Hitler. Well, how could that go wrong? I don't know how that could go wrong. Jesus Christ. Give Kanye a freaking break, for God's sake. The poor guy can't say some anti Semitic stuff and get away with it? No, bitch, you can't. Now, this next story is kind of personal to me. I've talked about it briefly and peripherally, but I want to talk about the governor of Minnesota, the place I live. You know, over the years, I've had plenty of complaints about Minnesota. My biggest complaint about Minnesota is the weather and how cold and snowy it gets. We just had a snowstorm come through this area. And you know what that fucker did? It went right around us. We got no snow. Temperatures dropped a little bit. But yesterday or the day before, we were sitting at 40, 45 degrees and zero snow on the ground. in Minnesota at the end of December. That's fucking crazy. That's clearly climate change, El Nino, whatever you want to call it. But the weather is vastly different than you would ever expect in Minnesota. Thing about Tim Walz, though, he is a Democrat, and Minnesota, for all intents and purposes, is a liberal state. And Tim Walz is kind of like the Joe Biden of Minnesota. He's got a lot done without a lot of power. Just listen to this. There might be not be another governor in America who has done more with less than Minnesota's Tim Walz. With a one-seat Democratic majority in the state Senate this year, Walz signed laws that enshrined abortion rights, provided free breakfast and lunch for all K-12 students, legalized cannabis, restored felons' voting rights, banned LGBT conversion therapy, and set ambitious new climate goals for the state. Now, looking to the 2024 election, Democrats are hoping Walz can do more with less yet again. As the newly named chairman of the Democratic Governors Association, the Minnesota is staring down a dauntingly narrow map of governor races across a challenging set of states and potentially looking at a run for president in 2028. And with the success he's had in Minnesota, he would certainly be qualified to run for president. I don't know that he has the charisma like Gavin Newsom or something like that, so that may work against him. He's a former school teacher. He's a very normal, average looking guy. He's well spoken, he's articulate. But when people tell you this isn't a popularity contest when it comes to voting for president, they're fucking wrong. It's exactly what it is. A popularity contest. For now, Walz is focused on 2024. Next year, Democrats' best opportunity to flip a governorship is in New Hampshire, where the popular governor, Chris Sununu, is not running for re-election. But after New Hampshire and Vermont, a liberal state that has nevertheless consistently voted to keep GOP Governor Phil Scott, Democrats' next most competitive states are ruby red Montana, Missouri, and Indiana. So it's going to be much tougher to flip those to Democratic governors unless all hell breaks loose and the wheels fall off. Walz also has one of the hardest states for Democrats to defend, perennial battleground North Carolina, where Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is term limited. The political climate in 2024 could make those fundamentally difficult races even tougher. Democrats increasingly fear Joe Biden's abysmal approval ratings, and they're worried that could drag down federal and state candidates. But don't count Walz among the worried. He's not the kind of guy that's going to worry about this shit. In a recent phone interview with the Daily Beast, the Minnesota governor distilled his vision for how Democrats from Biden to governor candidates can win in 2024, which he believes they will. The polls be damned. He's saying the same thing I am. Don't listen to the polls. The polls are frequently wrong. They went on to say, focus on those issues around freedom, because we're really trying to do it. Freedom to have our own reproductive care, freedom in the bedroom, freedom to read books we want. And I think that is the message, Walz said. While they're messing with nonsense, we're improving people's lives, getting things done. And I think that there's no way that cannot help both the president and down the ticket. And I agree with him. It'll be interesting to see how it goes with the governorships around the country. I think Ron DeSantis is up for re-election in 2024. I'm not positive of that. I have to check that actually. But he's on term limits too. He can't run again as governor of the state of Florida. So now that he's been shit canned, essentially, not actually, but essentially, from the presidential race, he's going to have to figure something else out. He's got to do something to keep him in cowboy boots and lifts. You can't just do nothing. So anyway, we'll see what happens with the governor's races. And as I've said, I'm very impressed with Governor Walz and all that he's done for the state of Minnesota. It's been truly amazing what he's been able to accomplish with not with little more than one extra vote in the legislature for Minnesota. He could be a good presidential candidate. I don't know that he has all the tools, as far as perceptively, but he is a smart guy. He's got a lot done, and he's a lot like Joe Biden in that regard. Now, in the age of Trump and MAGA aligned governors like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, the frame is one Democrats are increasingly embracing. Walz's specific record as governor situates him perhaps better than any other Democratic chief executive to make that case. Factor in his own sunny Midwestern disposition and his background as a high school history teacher, and it's not hard to see Democrats deploying Walz as something like an anti DeSantis. In fact, it's a contrast Walz welcomes, and they are just two totally different people. There's a clear difference between Ron DeSantis and me, he said, and there's a clear difference in our states, our policies going forward. He's down there worrying about taking books away, and we're getting rid of hunger. We're focusing on children's mental health. We're focusing on climate. Now, Walz has made something of a sport of attacking DeSantis, much like Gavin Newsom, at least subtly. He's drawn contrast a number of times on Twitter and is showing Democrats how they can lay out the popularity of the party's policies contrasted with the unpopularity of some of DeSantis's moves. He's a smart politician and he does a good job. And I would hope that, when it comes to 2028, he at least looks at that prospect, assuming everything continues to go as well as it has been going. Now, Donald Trump is looking to capitalize on the recent Colorado Supreme Court decision to bar him from the state's primary ballot. What do you think he's doing? He thought it was a big win, but it's not enough just to take the win. Of course, he's sending out multiple fundraising pitches in the hours after the decision. Fundraising emails are another reminder that Trump's legal clashes have helped fill his campaign coffers. Campaign finance report from WinRed, the main GOP online fundraising platform, showed that Trump's best online fundraising days over the first 6 months of the year coincided with his indictments and his arraignments. Trump's single best online fundraising day came on April 4th when Trump was arraigned in Manhattan regarding the hush money. But I got to tell you, these people have to be starting to get tired of this. They keep sending this clown money and nothing ever happens. Now, the latest legal clash came this week when Colorado's High Court ruled that Trump had participated in an insurrection and that placing Trump's name on the ballot would violate the Constitution. This decision could actually boost Trump by uniting the GOP behind him, which it doesn't look like it's doing, with even his Republican rivals rushing to criticize the ruling. And while the Trump campaign was confident the U.S. Supreme Court would block the state's court's ruling, the campaign was also looking to cash in on the news, and they are. It reads this way: removed from the ballot. That was on the subject line from a fundraising email sent earlier Wednesday afternoon following at least two pitches sent Tuesday night after the court's decision. The fundraising email urged supporters, please make a contribution to join the fight to keep my name on the 2024 ballot and peacefully defend your right to vote. You notice how he put peacefully in there. Well, he did that because he's already being charged with insurrection, and he doesn't want to give the impression that he's encouraging people to get out there and commit violence. That's not, and the reason it probably says this in this document is probably because somebody else wrote it. Donald Trump would more than likely do whatever he could to incite people to engage in violence and insurrection and the like. But Donald Trump is flailing here because any money that he collects, and this is one of the reasons I say he's going to have a tough time winning the election. Almost all the money he collects has to go to pay for his legal defense. Now, he needs money to live the lifestyle he's become accustomed to. He needs money in order to fund his campaign. I think yesterday he was out campaigning, did a rally someplace. He really loves doing those rallies, and whether they do him any good or not, who knows? I mean, when you go out every time to a friendly place and preach to the choir, that's not getting you more votes. You got to somehow get your message to people who maybe didn't vote for you or are thinking about it and going either way. Going out and talking to the people that think you're God doesn't do you any good. As I said, you're preaching to the choir. But Donald Trump is all about easy things. He doesn't want pushback. He doesn't want the bad questions. And this is why he's not showing up at the debates. And this is why it's going to be interesting if we have Donald Trump is as the nominee from the Republican Party. He's no doubt going to lose. There's no question about that. But the real question would he be willing to debate Joe Biden? Now he talks about Joe Biden being diminished and such, but would he step up and debate Joe Biden? I guarantee you this: Joe Biden would fucking dismantle Donald Trump. He would. He's just smarter. And the fact that he talks slower would work to his advantage. I mean, that's one of the things you need to do whenever you get somebody who's ranting and raving and arguing with you and expecting you to engage in the same way. All you need to do is step back, calm down, don't yell, and just talk facts. This drives these folks nuts because this is totally foreign to them. They want you to engage in the argument because they're used to that and they feel like they can win when they get you at that level. So just by virtue of that, you should try to avoid it all you can. People say, how do I not get crazy? How am I not anxious? That's easier said than done. And it's true, it's easier said than done. But anything you do right now, if you fly off the handle, if you do something stupid, this is all ingrained in your mind and in your soul, something you've learned along the way for whatever reason. So it's conceivable, if you've learned this along the way, it's conceivable that you could relearn something different. I know this works because I did it with myself. I used to lose my mind when I got mad, and then I realized that was working against me. I decided I'm going to stay cool. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to yell. And at first, it's hard because your nature is to go to what you've always done. But after you've done it a number of times and you do it over and over again, it becomes second nature. And I can't tell you how effective it is. People just hate it when you don't engage in an argument with them. They feel that's where they're going to win. Now, what will happen is when you stay calm and just spew facts, they'll go, oh, you think you're better than me because you're not arguing with me? I usually say, yeah, pretty much. I think I am because at least I've thought this out and I'm not going to do something that trips me up and do it to myself. But you go ahead. You go ahead and do that bullshit. I expect that out of a dumb Trumplifier. So anyway, he's raising money off the Supreme Court's um, action that benefited Donald Trump. But I'll tell you this, that's the weird thing. It doesn't have to be a negative or a positive thing for them to um, fundraise. You know, he thinks he got a win with the Supreme Court by not expediting this case. So he gets people to donate. But at the same time, he gets indicted, and that's a negative, and he gets people to donate. There's going to come a time when he's gone to the well too many times and he's not going to get enough. I think he's already to the point where he's getting a lot less than he had been, and I'm sure he's kind of nervous about that. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.